right, good afternoon, everyone. This is the March 18th, 2025 meeting of the City Finance Committee. Can I have a roll call, please?
Yes, we'll start with Committee Member Santa Maria.
Here.
Committee Member Harmon.
Here.
Committee Chair Friedman.
Here. We are all present. And is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to an item not on today's agenda, but under the purview of the Finance Committee? Since there's none in chambers, I'll see if there's any online.
Chair Friedman, no hands are raised.
All right, I'll close general public comment, and now we will move it on to our item of the day. And I'll turn it over to Mr. DiMartini.
Thank you so much, Chair Friedman. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Keith DiMartini. I'm the city's finance director. I'm here with Ms. Natalie Licoli, the city's controller, and it is our pleasure to present an overview of the annual comprehensive financial report for last fiscal year 2024. The agenda for today is to give a background of this report. Ms. Licoli will give an overview of the primary statements for the government-wide financial statements, including the general fund and the enterprise funds. And then we have our audit partner from CLA, which is the city's independent audit firm. Mr. Joe Luden will be presenting a couple of slides about the audit requirements and the results, and then we'll take questions, public comment, and discussion. So first, what is the annual comprehensive financial report? It's commonly referred to as the ACFR or the ACFR. It is basically the full financial report for last fiscal year, including the city's statement of net position, which is more commonly referred to as like the income statement, our revenues and expenditures, and then a statement. That's more of the balance sheet, and then we have our cash flow statements and all the other statements that are required to produce this report. We do comply with GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, best practices and standards, and we have routinely done that for decades. Just a reminder to the committee, we come to you very frequently to provide financial and budgetary updates. We come to the City Council monthly. We provide a financial statement overview on consent. We come to this committee quarterly, where we do a little bit of a deep dive into how things are progressing through the year, as well as provide projections. And then at the conclusion of the fiscal year, we produce this report, which is the annual comprehensive financial report. Again, it's prepared in accordance with our generally accepted accounting principles, and it just presents our overall condition and results of operation. It's comprehensive because it includes a significant amount of information in it, including detailed descriptions about assumptions and requirements, as well as statistical information in the back of it, which qualifies us for awards and just better transparency and accountability to the public. Again, the purpose is it's required, first and foremost. The city charter requires us to produce this report, which we do. Our report and our business practices are audited by an independent firm, CLA in this case. It's also required by state law. And it's also required when we issue debt. So it's the basis for an official statement when the city issues debt, which we did very recently for the police station and the Dwight Murphy playground renovation project. And it communicates to the public and the importance of this information so they can be well informed about our operations. We have received the GFOA award for excellence in financial reporting. We have done so for 36 years. The most recent one was last fiscal year's report. And so again, we go beyond just the minimum requirement of producing the statements. We value transparency and full disclosure and accountable information. We value clear communication of our financial and budgetary picture. And we want to encourage people to use this report as they see fit. The layout of the document is fairly complex. It starts with an introductory section, a letter from myself and from the city administrator, and a great deal of information about the city. And then we have our financial reports, and at the end we have a statistical section and notes to the financial statement, which provide a great deal of complementary information. And so with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Licoli, who will walk through the government-wide statements.
Thank you, Mr. DiMartini. Good afternoon, Finance Committee members and Chair Friedman. Before reviewing the result for fiscal year 24, I would like to point out that we increased our next position by 68.6 million, and we increased our revenue from taxes by 5.7 million. This slide, the statement of activity, highlight the operational result for governmental activity, which are generally subsidized by general fund. Overall, 66% of its operation is supported by tax revenue, with public safety as its larger division in need of financial support by 91%. The revenues supporting the governmental activities are dominated by sale, property, and transient occupancy taxes. The final net position is an additional $20.5 million that was added to the reserve. This slide shows the citywide result for fiscal year 24 in comparison to fiscal year 23. The statement of net position is divided in 3 sections. The first part shows assets for each type of activity, governmental and business. You will note that they're presented in 2 categories, the current and the capital assets. Under the line total asset, deferred outflow of resources is listed. It represents the asset that apply to future reporting period, such as prepaid expenses. The second section, liability, is categorized in a similar manner as asset in terms of time frame. Current is targeted to be paid off or reduced to 0 within 1 year, when non-current or long-term is an obligation that is expected to settle beyond 1 year, such as debt payment and pension obligation. Deferred inflow of resources represent sources such as revenue, grant received in advance, and for which an obligation is tied to its recognitions. The last section is net position, or the residual value after subtracting asset and deferred outflow from liability and deferred inflow. Governmental and business type activity increased its reserve by $68.6 million in comparison to fiscal year 23. The next section is the general fund financial statements. We're going to start with the revenue and expenditure summary report for the general fund that show an excess in spending by $8.6 million that result in use of reserve, bringing its ending fund balance down to $47 million. However, in comparison to revised budget, the revenue increased by $3.5 million and expenditure decreased by $9.4 million, or a reduction in loss by $12.9 million in comparison to the revised budget. The statement of net position for general fund hold total asset value for $62.5 million, dominated by the cash and investment. Liability with deferred inflow of resource is $15.4 million. The fund balances for $47.1 million are mostly tied to contingency and disaster reserve under committed. The negative result under unassigned reflect a shortage of $4.7 million.
Presented 2 weeks ago at the budget work session with the full city council. And just to remind the finance committee members is that, as Ms. LaCauley indicated, there are various categories of how we classify the city's reserves. And this graphic sort of shows it from left to right, being most restrictive on the right to least restrictive. Most restrictive on the left. As you work towards the right, they become lesser restrictive. And so you have things that are non-spendable, like our assets. There's legal requirements. There are restricted reserves as it relates to some carry forward appropriation that might occur from a prior fiscal year into the current fiscal year. All of the committed reserves, which is our largest category, are our disaster and contingency reserves. And then you have some assigned reserves and unassigned. And so when you present this information graphically and looking over the past 6 years, this is what it looks like. Again, this is a graph we showed just a couple weeks ago. Some takeaways here is that we have done well with maintaining our reserves. Over the last couple of years, although we've fallen short a little bit slightly in a couple of those years. And so again, through this strong fiscal discipline that we have as an organization, through really active, proactive, and long-term budget practices, we've been able to focus on reserve management as well. We are below the minimum requirement in our reserves at the end of fiscal year 2024, but not too far below. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Ms. LaCauley.
Thank you, Mr. DiMartini. Now we're going to review the enterprise fund financial statements. And we'll start with the income statement. So the income statement, or revenue minus expenses for business activity, show positive result for most of our fund, led by water and clean energy departments. The statement of net position, this slide show the net position for our business department. In comparison to last year, most departments are in a better position, at the exception of downtown parking. Sorry. The cash flow. Cash flow statement show the strong key indicator for operational efficiency, liquidity, and financial health. On that slide, we'll see that 62% of the enterprise fund brought positive cash flow at the end of the fiscal year. The next slide shows the activity. The cash flow statement is broken down in 4 different sections. The first one, the cash for operating activity, indicate that the department can sustain operation without external funding. 50% of our department came back with positive result. Cash from non-capital financing activity relate to cash inflow that come from grant, debt, or subsidized to support general operation, and cash outflow for repayment of debt obligation. The cash from capital and financing activity relate directly to acquisition and disposal of capital asset, its financing, and repayment of its debt. And last is the cash from investing activity, cash from interest that is earned from current investment, which is obviously heavily depending on the market.
And then concluding with reserves in each of the 8 enterprise funds for the city, you can see the same reserve categories that I described earlier, from the most restrictive up top, all the way down to being non-spendable, restricted, committed, and then assigned and unassigned. And as you can see, the majority of our enterprises are not only meeting the minimum requirement for the reserves per the City Council adopted resolution, there's also a healthy unassigned, sort of assigned balance of reserves that's second to the bottom line, and that's an amount that these enterprises will be using to invest in their capital infrastructure needs, as articulated in the recently approved draft capital improvement plan that went to council just a week ago. And so that's cash above and beyond the minimum requirement. However, it's planned and assigned for those substantial capital uses. You can see, however, that a couple of the enterprises are not meeting their reserve requirements. The airport really has to do with one-time money that they received during COVID with sort of relief funds. It's sort of a transition away from that, moving into sort of more normal ongoing operating type activities. And downtown parking, this committee is well aware of the financial trouble that the downtown parking is facing, and of course we'll be addressing that going forward with the full City Council in upcoming budget conversations. And so with that, I will ask Mr. Joe Luden, the city's audit partner from CLA, to give a brief presentation of the audit process and their findings.
Thank you, Mr. DiMartini. Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. Again, as Mr. DiMartini mentioned, my name is Joe Luden, and I am an audit partner at Clifton Larson Allen, and we were engaged to perform a financial statement audit for the City of Santa Barbara, and I'm in charge of that audit. So I'm happy today to go through the results of that audit. You can go to the next slide. I'm not sure what you guys are seeing because I can't see it right now. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to first go through the procedures that we perform in order to provide our opinion that we'll be going through a little bit later. So we do perform our audit and plan our audit in order to provide reasonable assurance rather than absolute assurance that your financial statements are free from any material misstatement. We do that by testing the city's records. We do that on a sample basis, and we make sure that those amounts and the supporting schedules to those amounts agree to both your disclosures and to your financial statements. Part of our process is also gaining an understanding of the city's internal control environment and its IT environment. Based upon our assessment of those environments and any risk of material misstatement from those environments to the financial statement, that dictates a little bit of how we will sample and the amount of items that we will test. So that's how we start our process on the audit. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to go through the reports that we have issued or will be issuing. Our independent auditor's report, which as noted here, you can find on page 13 of the ACFR. Our gas letter, which is our internal control letter provided to council and to the finance committee here. Our agreed upon procedures, this relates to our GAN appropriations limit that the city adopts annually. We also issue a letter on our communication with those charged with governance. And we have two additional financial statements, one related to the Airport Passenger Facility Charge Fund, and then also to the California Law Enforcement Telecommunications System Message Switching System. In other words, CLETS, that's a mouthful, but we do that one as well. Next slide, please. So I want to go through our audit findings, or what the different levels of audit findings would be. These would be reported on your gas letter or internal control letter. The first is a material weakness. This is a combination of deficiencies or a deficiency by itself that would materially misstate the financial statements. So if we found something that met that definition, we would communicate that to you in your gas letter. A significant deficiency is a deficiency or combination of deficiencies in internal controls that are really less severe than a material weakness, meaning they wouldn't have resulted in a material misstatement of your financial statements, but they are still something that we would communicate to those charged with governance because we believe that they meet that standard. A control deficiency is less severe than the first two, and really it relates to something going through our testing where we find that the city is not following potentially a policy. So as an example, the city's purchasing policy, if we were looking through a disbursement and we identified that the city was not actually following the policy that they had in place, that would be considered a control deficiency and something that we would have identified and communicated to you. Next slide, please. So our audit opinion, which again is really what we do all the work to be able to provide the city. This is going to go through the opinions and the various opinion units that we have audited. So the city has various opinion units. In watching the presentation that you have been seeing here from Ms. LaCauley and Mr. DiMartini, the various areas that they're talking about, from your water fund to the general fund, those are independent opinion units that we test individually to make sure that those individual opinion units are materially accurate. We're going to go through any change, if there was a change in accounting principle, which there wasn't any this year. It's going to also talk about the responsibilities of management. So management really is responsible for the fair presentation and preparation of the financial statements that are prepared. Our responsibility as an auditor is to make sure we've audited the financial statements so that, again, we can provide our opinion that there's reasonable assurance that the financial statements are not materially misstated. The ACFR also is going to include required supplementary information, other information. All of these schedules are included in that financial statement, and we don't audit those specific schedules, but we do perform certain limited procedures and ensure that they are consistent with all the rest of the financial statements that have been audited. And I think that concludes my portion, so I will pass it back to Mr. DiMartini.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Luden. Just to conclude, a couple remarks. The city largely ends year over year with a strong net position. We have very strong internal controls. I'm really happy to report that the city had no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies or control deficiencies at all on this audit report. It was one of the cleanest audit reports that we've ever had. So that's a testament to the hard work of city staff and the leadership of city leadership and city council and finance committee are testament to that. We have been focusing on our reserves and focusing on just long-term financial planning practices, which bode well for our financial statements. We do have a growing pension and OPEB liability. We've established the Section 115 trust to help address our pension liability going forward. Our self-insurance fund is still underfunded, so that's an area of focus going forward. Clearly, a vast majority of the city's net position is related to fixed assets. The city has over 400 buildings, and so the continued focus on them, making sure that we're utilizing them, that we're maintaining them, that we're properly insuring them, those are things to be focusing on. planning for this current fiscal year, which we're in, fiscal year 25, continuing to provide you with quarterly updates. And then obviously, we've already kicked off the budget planning cycle for fiscal year 26 and 27. And so I also want to just thank a number of staff that were very instrumental in getting this report completed under the direction of Ms. Natalie Licoli, the city's controller. We have Jessica, Joe is back here, Takaro, we have Lynn, Saralyn. Those are staff that have worked incredibly hard to produce this report. And really, it's a testament to the entire city. Anybody who works in the city touches a transaction that ultimately is reported in these financial statements. And so I just want to thank staff that were involved with this process all the way through. And with that, we ask that you accept the report, and we'll take any questions that you have. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you for the report, and open up to questions. Any questions? All right, I got a couple questions. This is such a big report, I would just ask a couple questions just to make sure that we're doing our job up here because it's such a big report to do, but just a couple quick ones. If you could pull up slide 12. On slide 12, on the liabilities, the non-current liabilities, the 622 million, I think that is. Is that the unfunded pension liability majority of that? And what is our unfunded pension liability?
Chair Friedman, yes, this is correct. Under the non-current liability, it's heavily tied up to the pension liability that we have with PERS, with CalPERS, yes.
And I believe it's about the $400 million number.
400 million.
Yeah, citywide, yeah.
And we did start the Pension 115 Trust to address
We
that,
did.
so that's a positive step that we've taken.
Yep.
Great. And then on slide 14, just wanted to understand the third line down, the variance with the revised budget of positive 12 million. That's mostly, as we can see, would be the expenditure reductions, I guess. So what enabled us to reduce our expenditures that significantly?
Yes, Chair Friedman. Chair Friedman, thank you for that question. And so when looking at the difference between the adopted budget to revised budget, the revised budget will always include any appropriation from the prior year that got carried forward into that current fiscal year. That happens because we enter into multi-year contractual obligations, as an example. But staff has been very focused on controlling our expenditures, and so not spending where we don't need to, delaying projects. The vast majority of the expenditure reduction targets that departments have been meeting have been holding positions vacant, as this committee is aware of. And so a lot of the savings is resulting from that. The upside too, as you can see on the first line, is that our revenue came in a little bit stronger, right, than what we originally budgeted, as well as the revised budget. So that obviously has a positive impact on sort of the year-end result as well.
Thank you. And so that a little higher revenue, but then the controlling of the expenses at
Correct.
9 million with vacancies open. That's sustainable in the short term, but long term, it means that work it's not that it's not being performed a lot of the times, it's that it's being taken up by existing staff without having the position there that's normally going to be doing that.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, perfect. And then it's like slide 20 and 21, there's my last two, they're kind of related, and you went over it and just wanted to reiterate it since it is such a big number. On 21 with the airport, the cash and equivalents change, that's slide 21. Yeah, the negative 823. If you could just clarify again, that had to do with one-time funding, is that right?
Chair Friedman, not necessary. If we're looking into the following slide that is breaking down the cash flow in a different section, I would say that yes, it's mostly driven by the operating activity without any specification at that point, a negative balance or an overspent, I would say at this point, could be affiliated to services where there is a difficulty of collecting the cash from. It could be as well related to an increase in inventory where the cash is, paid upfront, not really without revenue generated from this inventory. It could be as well to higher operating activities as well as decrease in revenue directly from the airport. So there's many different factors that could be affected. But that's not affiliated directly to that one-time funding.
Okay. So that's an ongoing issue that we're going to.
It is an ongoing, yes.
And this was the other slide I had, and the other question I had, I assume would be somewhat similar to solid waste, the negative on that from the operating activities as well.
That's correct, yes.
Perfect. That is all the questions I have. Is there any public comment on this item? Not seeing any in chambers. Is there any online?
Chair Friedman, no hands are raised.
I will close public comment, turn it over to my colleagues for comments, and then a motion to accept it and move it up to council. Member Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing, there's obviously so much information here, and every year, I think Chair Friedman says it's so important. If you're going to read one document, have this be it. So I'm going to steal his thunder and reiterate that. But what I wanted to specifically point out, and now I can't find the slide. Oh, the no findings determination, I think, deserves, as you highlighted, I want to highlight again, and I think you all deserve a huge amount of credit for that result. That's incredibly impressive, and I hope that folks hear that in the city and realize what careful stewards you all are and what we try to be of their tax dollars. And this is just reflective of the care and concern that you take. And I'm very grateful for that. This is a really impressive fact, and it's one that I'm very excited to go out and tell people about. So I just had to specifically remark on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Member Santa Maria?
Thank you, Chair Friedman. I just wanted to echo their sentiments. Thank you again to you and the rest of the staff that is truly taking care of the financial health of our organization, the city. If you're entertaining motions, I'd be happy to make a motion to accept the staff recommendation.
Motion's been made. Is there a second? Second by Member Harmon. I will just briefly add that 36 years, the fact that we have no significant findings or even control deficiencies, which is really big, because usually there's one or two. When I was talking with both of you the other day, so usually there's one or two, but there wasn't even that this year, which is quite amazing. So I have all the confidence that it will move on to 37 years. And then raising it every year, we keep going. And so, but again, just want to echo what my colleagues both said, is it's a year-long effort through the entire organization and putting this together, and thanks to our partners with Clifton Allen, Arson Allen, on the audit, and all of our staff throughout the city, because it shows that you take this seriously and accounting for how the revenue comes in and then how it is expended, and to have clear records for it. It's extremely important. And again, it's a year. It's every day throughout the year, and then when you come back and audit it, it just shows that we have those practices in there. So I want to thank your department, Mr. DiMartini, for your leadership, and our city administrator, Ms. McAdoo, and all of our departments. So with that, the motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. And no opposed or abstentions. Passes unanimously, and we are adjourned.